Sarah Mitchell pulled her old Honda into the parking lot of the quick-stop convenience store. The sun was setting over San Diego, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She had just finished her evening workout at the gym and wanted to grab a bottle of water and maybe some fruit for tomorrow's breakfast. At 32 years old, Sarah looked like any other woman you might see at the grocery store or walking down the street. She wore simple jeans and a gray sweatshirt. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested what she really was or what she had done in her past. Sarah had spent 8 years in the Navy, but she was not just any sailor. She had been a Navy SEAL, one of the very few women who had made it through the brutal training program. She had served 2 tours overseas in places most people only saw on the news. She had faced dangers that would give normal people nightmares. But now all of that was behind her. She worked as a security consultant for a private company. She rarely talked about her military days. She liked her quiet life. The bell above the door chimed as Sarah walked into the store. The familiar smell of coffee and cleaning products filled the air. An older man stood behind the counter. His name tag read Jim. He was reading a magazine and barely looked up when she entered. Sarah headed toward the back of the store where the refrigerated section was located. She grabbed a large bottle of water and then moved to the produce area. As she picked up an apple to check if it was fresh, the bell chimed again. 3 men walked in. Something felt wrong immediately. Sarah had learned to trust her instincts during her years in the military. Those instincts had kept her alive more times than she could count. Right now, every one of those instincts was screaming at her that danger had just walked through the door. She did not turn around to stare at the men. That would have been obvious. Instead, she pretended to examine the apples while watching their reflection in the glass door of the refrigerator. The 3 men split up as soon as they entered. 2 of them walked down different aisles. They were not shopping. They were positioning themselves. The 3rd man stayed near the entrance, his hand in his jacket pocket. Sarah's heart rate stayed calm and steady. Her training had taught her to control her physical responses to stress. She took a slow breath and continued her assessment. The man near the door was probably the lookout. The other 2 were the primary threats. One was tall and heavily built, probably over 6 feet and 200 pounds. The other was shorter but moved with nervous energy that made him unpredictable. An elderly woman entered the store, completely unaware of the situation developing around her. She had white hair and carried a small purse. She smiled at Jim behind the counter and began looking at the lottery tickets displayed near the register. Sarah saw Jim's hand move slowly under the counter. He had noticed something was wrong too. He was probably reaching for a silent alarm button. Smart man. Everything happened fast after that. The tall man suddenly vaulted over the counter with surprising speed for his size. Jim stumbled backward, his hand jerking away from the alarm. The tall man grabbed Jim by his shirt collar and shoved him against the wall of cigarette packages behind the counter. "Open the register," the tall man shouted. His voice was rough and angry. "Open it now or I will hurt you." The shorter man moved toward the elderly woman. She let out a small scream of fear and clutched her purse to her chest. The man by the door pulled out what looked like a gun from his pocket and pointed it at the ceiling. "Everyone stay calm," the man with the gun yelled. "Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt." Sarah stood perfectly still. Her mind was racing through options and scenarios. There were 3 attackers, at least 1 gun that she could see. 2 innocent civilians who could not defend themselves. The situation was dangerous but not impossible. She could walk away. She could pretend to be just another scared customer and let this play out. The robbers would probably take the money and leave. The police would eventually arrive. Nobody might get hurt, but Sarah knew that was wishful thinking. Robberies like this often went wrong. People panicked. Guns went off. Innocent people died, and she could not live with herself if she stood by and let that happen when she had the skills to stop it. Jim was fumbling with the register, his hands shaking. The tall man behind the counter was getting more agitated. "Faster," he screamed. "Move faster, old man." The shorter robber grabbed the elderly woman by her arm. She cried out in pain. He started pulling her toward the front of the store, probably planning to use her as a hostage or shield. That was when Sarah made her decision. "Hey," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Let her go." All 3 men turned to look at her. The shorter one still had his hand on the elderly woman's arm. For a moment, everyone in the store was frozen, staring at Sarah. "Mind your own business, lady," the man with the gun said. He was trying to sound tough, but Sarah could hear the nervousness in his voice. Get down on the floor now. Sarah did not move. She kept her hands visible at her sides, open and non-threatening. Her posture was relaxed, but she was ready to move in any direction in a split second. I cannot do that, Sarah said simply. You need to let the woman go. Take the money if you want, but leave the people alone. The tall man behind the counter laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You think you are some kind of hero? He said. You think you can stop us? I am asking you to make a better choice, Sarah replied. Her voice stayed steady and calm. Before this gets worse for everyone. The shorter man let go of the elderly woman and started walking towards Sarah. His fists were clenched. You need to learn to keep your mouth shut, he said. Sarah shifted her weight slightly, preparing. She was calculating distances, angles, and timing. The man approaching her was angry, which made him sloppy. The one with the gun near the door looked uncertain. The tall one behind the counter was focused on Jim and the register. Last chance, Sarah said quietly. Walk away now. The shorter man was close now, about 6 feet away. Or what? He sneered. What are you going to do about it? Sarah did not answer. She was waiting, watching, reading his body language. The man lunged forward suddenly, but Sarah had seen it coming. He was telegraphing his movements. As he came at her, she started to step aside, but the tall man behind the counter had moved too. He had abandoned Jim and was now coming around the counter fast. Sarah found herself facing 2 attackers. The shorter man tried to grab her by her sweatshirt. Sarah twisted away, but the tall man was already there. He was faster than he looked. Before Sarah could fully react, the tall man drove his knee upward with brutal force. The strike caught Sarah in her rib cage. Pain exploded through her side. The impact would have dropped most people instantly. The force behind the blow was tremendous. Sarah staggered backward 2 steps. The air had been knocked from her lungs. Her ribs screamed in protest. She could already feel bruising starting to form. The pain was sharp and immediate, but she did not fall. Years of conditioning, of being hit and learning to push through pain, kept her on her feet. Her SEAL training had included getting struck, kicked, and thrown repeatedly until pain became just another piece of information to process rather than something that stopped her. The tall man's smile faded as he realized Sarah was still standing. His eyes narrowed as he looked at her more carefully. Sarah straightened slowly, her hand moving to her side. Her face showed the pain, but her eyes had changed. They had become cold, focused, and dangerous. The elderly woman was crying quietly near the lottery tickets. Jim was still behind the counter, frozen in shock. The man with the gun by the door had taken a step forward, trying to understand what he was seeing. Sarah took a slow breath, testing her ribs. At least 2 were bruised, maybe cracked, but she could still move. She could still fight, and now these men had made a critical mistake. They had attacked her. They had escalated this from a robbery to violence, and they had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. The tall man seemed to sense that something had shifted. He took a step back, uncertainty flickering across his face. The shorter man looked between Sarah and his partner, confused. What is wrong with you, lady? The shorter man said. You should be on the ground. Sarah rolled her shoulders slightly, loosening her muscles despite the pain in her ribs. Her stance changed subtly. Anyone with combat training would have recognized it immediately. She was no longer a scared civilian. She was a weapon that had just been activated. You should not have done that, Sarah said quietly. Her voice was different now. Colder. It was the voice of someone who had faced much worse than 3 convenience store robbers. You really should not have done that. The tall man suddenly realized they had made a terrible mistake. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. This was not some random woman who would just fall down and let them do whatever they wanted. This was something else entirely. And they were about to find out exactly what a Navy SEAL could do. The tall man moved first. He came at Sarah with another knee strike, trying to repeat what had worked before. But this time Sarah was ready. This time she was not trying to de-escalate. This time she was responding. Her body moved before her conscious mind fully processed the attack. 8 years of training had created muscle memory that did not require thought. As the knee came up toward her already injured ribs, Sarah rotated her hips and stepped to the outside. The knee strike missed her by inches. In the same fluid motion, Sarah grabbed the man's raised leg with both hands. One hand went behind his knee, the other gripped his ankle. Before he could react or regain his balance, Sarah twisted hard and pushed. The tall man's own momentum worked against him. He crashed to the floor with a heavy thud that shook the displays of candy bars nearby. The shorter man yelled something and rushed at Sarah from the side. He was swinging wildly, his fists coming in wide arcs. No training, just anger and adrenaline. Sarah ducked under the first swing and drove her palm upward into his chest. It was a controlled strike, hard enough to knock the wind out of him and stop his attack, but not hard enough to cause serious damage. He stumbled backward, gasping for air. His eyes were wide with shock. The tall man was getting back to his feet. Sarah could see him reaching for his waistband. Her mind processed the information instantly. He might have a weapon. She could not let him draw it. Sarah closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps. As the man's hand came out of his waistband holding a knife, Sarah's hand shot out. She grabbed his wrist with her right hand while her left hand came up under his elbow. It was a basic disarming technique that she had practiced thousands of times during her training. She applied pressure to specific points on his wrist and elbow simultaneously. The pain was instant and overwhelming. The man's fingers opened involuntarily. The knife fell from his hand and clattered across the floor, sliding under a shelf of motor oil. Before he could recover, Sarah twisted his arm behind his back and applied a lock that brought him to his knees. She used just enough force to control him without breaking anything. Her instructors had taught her the difference between controlling an opponent and destroying them. Right now she needed control. "Stay down," Sarah said firmly. Her voice was calm despite her racing heart and the pain in her ribs. "Do not make me hurt you more." The man groaned in pain but stopped struggling. He knew he was beaten. The shorter man had caught his breath and was looking around frantically. His eyes landed on a glass bottle of wine on a nearby shelf. He grabbed it and smashed it against the shelf edge, creating a jagged weapon. Glass and red wine splattered across the floor. "Let him go," the shorter man screamed. He was holding the broken bottle like a knife, pointing it at Sarah. His hand was shaking. "Let him go or I will cut you." Sarah kept her grip on the tall man's arm but turned her attention to the new threat. The broken bottle was dangerous. Glass weapons could do terrible damage. But the man holding it was terrified. That made him unpredictable but also sloppy. "Put the bottle down," Sarah said calmly. "You do not want to do this." "Shut up," the man yelled. Tears were streaming down his face now. Everything had gone wrong for him in the last 60 seconds. "Just shut up and let him go." From her position holding the tall man, Sarah was calculating her options. The broken bottle was about 8 feet away. If he charged her, she would have to release her current captive to defend herself. That was not ideal. She needed to end this quickly. "Listen to me," Sarah said, her tone becoming softer but still firm. "I know you are scared. I know this is not how you wanted this to go. But if you come at me with that bottle, I will have to stop you. And I will stop you. So please just put it down." The man hesitated. Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. He was weighing his options. Fight or surrender. His friend was already caught. The lookout by the door had not moved to help either of them. Everything was falling apart. "Think about what happens next," Sarah continued. "If you attack me with that weapon, you add assault with a deadly weapon to your charges. Is that what you want? Is this worth that?" The man's hand was still shaking. The broken bottle caught the fluorescent light, sending reflections across the walls. For a long moment nobody moved. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerators and the quiet crying of the elderly woman, who was still huddled near the lottery tickets. Then, slowly, the man's hand lowered. The fight went out of him like air from a balloon. He set the broken bottle down on a shelf and put his hands up. "Smart choice," Sarah said. She spoke to Jim without taking her eyes off the 2 robbers. "Jim, are you okay? Can you call the police?" Jim's shaky voice came from behind the counter. "I already pressed the alarm. They should be coming. Are you okay? Your ribs?" "I will be fine," Sarah said, though the pain was getting worse now that the adrenaline was starting to fade. "Can you find something to restrain these 2 until the police arrive?" "Zip ties, rope, anything." Jim disappeared into a back room and returned with several heavy-duty zip ties, the kind used for securing large packages. Sarah quickly secured the tall man's wrists behind his back, pulling the plastic tight. Then she did the same with the shorter man, who offered no resistance. He seemed to be in shock. The man by the door suddenly realized he was the only one still free. He turned and bolted for the exit. Sarah started to move after him, but pain shot through her ribs, stopping her. She made a quick decision. Chasing him would mean leaving two dangerous men unsecured and putting the civilians at risk. She had already stopped the immediate threat. The third man was a problem for the police. "Let him go," Sarah said to Jim, who looked like he might try to stop the fleeing robber himself. "We have these two. The police can find the third one." In the distance, Sarah could hear sirens. They were getting louder, getting closer. The police were maybe 2 minutes away. Sarah moved to the elderly woman who was still trembling near the lottery tickets. She knelt down carefully, trying not to show how much her ribs hurt. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked gently. "Did they hurt you?" The woman looked up at Sarah with tears in her eyes. "My arm," she said softly. "He grabbed my arm so hard." Sarah gently examined the woman's arm. There would definitely be bruises, but nothing seemed broken. "You are going to be okay," Sarah said. "The police are almost here. They will have paramedics check you out." "Who are you?" the woman asked, her voice full of wonder and confusion. "How did you do that?" "I thought we were going to die." Sarah helped the woman to her feet. "I am just someone who was in the right place at the right time," she said simply. "What is your name?" "Eleanor," the woman said. "Eleanor Chen. Well, Mrs. Chen, you are safe now." That is what matters. The sirens were very loud now. Red and blue lights began flashing through the store windows. Sarah heard car doors slamming and the sound of running feet. "Police! Everyone stay where you are." 2 officers burst through the door, guns drawn. They took in the scene quickly. 2 men zip-tied and sitting on the floor. Sarah standing with her hands visible. Jim behind the counter looking shaken, and an elderly woman being comforted. "We got a silent alarm," one officer said. He was young, maybe in his late 20s. "What happened here?" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Jim found his voice. "These 3 men tried to rob the store," Jim said, pointing at the 2 on the floor. "There was a third one, but he ran away. This woman," he pointed at Sarah, "she stopped them. She saved us. One of them kneed her in the ribs and she fought them both off like it was nothing." The officers looked at Sarah with new interest. The second officer, an older man with gray hair, holstered his weapon and approached her carefully. "Ma'am, are you injured?" he asked. "You said one of them struck you?" "My ribs are bruised," Sarah admitted. The adrenaline was wearing off completely now, and the pain was becoming hard to ignore. "But I am okay. These 2 need to be arrested. They assaulted people and attempted armed robbery." More police cars arrived. Soon the small convenience store was filled with officers. Paramedics came in and immediately went to check on Mrs. Chen and Sarah. Sarah tried to wave them off, but the paramedic, a young woman with kind eyes, insisted on examining her ribs. "You need to go to the hospital," the paramedic said after a careful examination. "You might have fractured ribs. These are serious bruises at minimum." "I will go later," Sarah said. "I need to give my statement first." A detective arrived. His badge identified him as Detective James Rodriguez. He was in his 40s, with sharp eyes that took in every detail of the scene. He spent several minutes talking to the uniformed officers and examining the security cameras positioned around the store. Then he approached Sarah, who was sitting on a chair that Jim had brought out for her. Mrs. Chen was sitting nearby, an ice pack on her arm, refusing to leave until she knew Sarah was okay. "Miss," Detective Rodriguez started. "Mitchell." "Sarah Mitchell." "Miss Mitchell, I need to ask you some questions about what happened here. Are you up for that?" "Yes, of course." The detective pulled out a notebook. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." Sarah took a breath and began her account. She kept it simple and factual. She described how the 3 men entered, how they positioned themselves, how the robbery began. She explained her decision to intervene when Mrs. Chen was grabbed. The emergency room was busy that night. Sarah sat on an examination table while a doctor looked at X-rays of her rib cage on a computer screen. The doctor was a tired-looking man in his 50s who had probably seen every kind of injury imaginable during his career. "You have 2 cracked ribs," he said, pointing at the screen. "See these hairline fractures here and here? You are very lucky. A little more force and these could have been complete breaks. You also have significant bruising. This is going to hurt for several weeks." "How long until I can exercise again?" Sarah asked. The doctor raised his eyebrows. "You were just assaulted and nearly killed, and you are asking about exercise. Give it at least 4 to 6 weeks for the ribs to heal. No heavy lifting, no contact sports, no strenuous activity. Your body needs time to recover." Sarah nodded but said nothing. 4 to 6 weeks felt like forever. She had been working out every day since she left the Navy. It kept her centered, focused. But she knew the doctor was right. "I am going to prescribe pain medication," the doctor continued. "Take it as directed. Ice the area for the first 48 hours, then switch to heat. And if you have trouble breathing or the pain gets worse, come back immediately." After the doctor finished, a nurse wrapped Sarah's torso in a tight bandage to help stabilize her ribs. Every movement hurt, but Sarah kept her expression neutral. She had dealt with pain before. This was manageable. Detective Rodriguez was waiting in the hallway when Sarah was discharged. He stood up from a plastic chair when he saw her. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "do you have a ride home? I would be happy to drive you." Sarah had been planning to call a taxi, but she accepted the detective's offer. Something told her he wanted to talk more about what happened. They walked out to his unmarked police car in silence. The night air was cool and felt good after the stuffiness of the hospital. Once they were both in the car, Detective Rodriguez turned to face her before starting the engine. "I watched the security footage from the store," he said. "All 3 cameras. I have been a police officer for 22 years, Miss Mitchell. I have seen a lot of things, but I have never seen anyone move like you did in that store." Sarah looked out the window. "I did what I had to do. You served in the Navy. You said you had combat training. But that was not regular military training. The way you disarmed that knife, the control you showed, the technique, that was special operations level training." Sarah remained silent. "Were you a SEAL?" Detective Rodriguez asked quietly. Sarah turned to look at him. His expression was not judgmental or suspicious. He looked genuinely curious and respectful. After a long moment, she nodded once. "Yes." The detective let out a low whistle. "I thought so. I have worked with a few special operations guys over the years. You can always tell. There is a way they move, a way they assess situations." He paused. "How long have you been out?" 4 years. "And you work as a security consultant now?" "Yes, for a private company. I evaluate security systems, train personnel, that kind of thing. Nothing exciting." Detective Rodriguez started the car and pulled out of the hospital parking lot. "Well, you certainly made things exciting tonight. Those 2 men you stopped? We have been looking for them for 3 weeks. They hit 7 stores in that time. Always at night, always small convenience stores or gas stations. We knew it was a matter of time before someone got hurt." "What about the 3rd man?" Sarah asked. "The one who ran? We caught him about an hour ago. He did not get far. He is in custody now, along with his 2 friends. They are looking at serious charges. Armed robbery, assault, attempted kidnapping of Mrs. Chen. The prosecutor is going to have a field day with this one." They drove through the quiet streets. Sarah gave him her address, and they rode in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "The media is going to be all over this," Detective Rodriguez said. "Woman stops armed robbery single-handedly. That is a big story. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah's stomach tightened. She had not thought about the media. "Can you keep my name out of it?" "I will do my best," the detective promised. "But you should know that Mrs. Chen is already telling everyone who will listen about the brave woman who saved her life. The store owner, too. You are going to get attention whether you want it or not." Sarah groaned softly. The last thing she wanted was attention. She had left the Navy specifically to get away from that life, to become normal again. Now one incident had thrust her back into the spotlight. Detective Rodriguez pulled up in front of Sarah's apartment building. Before she got out, he handed her his business card. "If you need anything, call me," he said. "And thank you, Miss Mitchell. What you did tonight took courage. You saved lives." Sarah took the card. "I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." "No," Detective Rodriguez said firmly. "You were in the right place at exactly the right time. Those people needed you, and you were there. That matters." Sarah thanked him and got out of the car. Every step toward her apartment sent pain through her ribs. She climbed the stairs slowly, finally reaching her door on the 3rd floor. Inside, her apartment was dark and quiet. She turned on a lamp and sat down carefully on her couch. Her phone had been buzzing in her pocket for the last hour. She had been ignoring it at the hospital. Now she pulled it out and saw dozens of missed calls and text messages. Her boss from the security company, her mother, several friends, and 3 calls from a number she recognized immediately. Commander Michael Torres. Her former team leader from her SEAL days. She called him back. "Sarah," his voice came through the phone, warm and concerned. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" "How did you already see news?" Sarah asked. "It just happened a few hours ago." It is all over social media. Someone in the store must have posted about it. There is video of the police cars and ambulances. The story says an unnamed woman stopped 3 armed robbers. I knew it was you. Of course you did, Sarah said with a tired smile. I am okay, Mike. Couple cracked ribs, but I will live. You stopped 3 men by yourself? There was not really a choice. They were going to hurt people. She could hear the pride in his voice when he spoke again. Once a seal, always a seal. You did good, Sarah. I am proud of you. They talked for another 10 minutes. Commander Torres made her promise to keep him updated on her recovery. He also warned her about the media attention that was likely coming her way. After hanging up, Sarah made herself a cup of tea and sat down with her laptop. She searched for news about the incident. Sure enough, several local news sites already had stories posted. The headlines varied. Armed robbery stopped by brave customer. Woman fights off 3 robbers. Heroes among us. Most of the stories did not have her name yet, but they all mentioned that the woman who stopped the robbery appeared to have military or martial arts training. Some included interviews with Jim, the store clerk, who described how Sarah had fought off the attackers like something out of an action movie. There was even a grainy cell phone video that someone had taken from outside the store. It showed police cars and ambulances, and in one brief moment it showed Sarah being led to the ambulance by paramedics. The video had already been viewed thousands of times. Sarah closed her laptop and leaned back carefully against the couch cushions. Tomorrow, her life was going to change. The phone calls would increase. People would want interviews. Her privacy would be invaded. Everything she had tried to leave behind would come rushing back. But then she thought about Mrs. Chen's face. The terror in the elderly woman's eyes when that man grabbed her. The relief and gratitude when she thanked Sarah at the hospital. Sarah thought about Jim, who might have been seriously hurt or killed if the robbery had gone differently. The attention was unwelcome. The pain in her ribs was real. The disruption to her quiet life was frustrating, but she had saved lives tonight. That was something that mattered more than her comfort. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was her mother. She answered and spent the next 30 minutes reassuring her mom that she was fine, that the injuries were minor, that there was nothing to worry about. Her mother had always struggled with Sarah's decision to join the military. The idea that her daughter had been in combat situations had given her countless sleepless nights. Now, even though Sarah was supposed to be living a safe civilian life, danger had found her again. I wish you would have just called the police and stayed out of it, her mother said, her voice thick with worry. Mom, there was not time for that. People were in danger right then. But you could have been killed, but I was not. I am fine, I promise. After finally ending the call, Sarah decided to try to get some sleep. She changed into comfortable clothes, moving slowly to avoid jarring her ribs. She took one of the pain pills the doctor had prescribed and set an alarm for the morning. Sleep did not come easily. Every time she shifted position, her ribs reminded her of what happened. And when she finally did drift off, her dreams were filled with images from the store. The fear in Mrs. Chen's eyes. The sound of the knife hitting the floor. The tall man's knee driving toward her ribs. She woke up several times during the night, each time taking a moment to remember where she was and that she was safe. Morning came too soon. Sarah's phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. It was her boss, Marcus Webb, from the security company. Sarah, I just heard what happened. Are you okay? 3 days had passed since the incident at the Quick Stop. Sarah's ribs still hurt with every breath, but she was managing the pain without the prescription medication. She had always preferred to deal with discomfort naturally when possible. Years of physical training had taught her that pain was just information, not something to fear. The media attention had been worse than she expected. Her name had been leaked to the press within 24 hours. By the second day, reporters were camped outside her apartment building. Camera crews wanted interviews. Newspapers wanted her story. Television producers called offering to feature her on their shows. Sarah had declined every single request. She released one brief statement through Detective Rodriguez thanking everyone for their concern and asking for privacy. Most media outlets respected this, but a few persistent reporters continued to try to reach her. Her social media accounts, which she rarely used, had exploded with friend requests and messages from strangers. Some thanked her for her service. Others wanted to hear about her SEAL training. A few negative messages came from people who thought she had used excessive force. though these were rare and usually shouted down by others defending her actions. Sarah had made her social media accounts private and stopped checking them altogether. Now she sat in the San Diego Police Department headquarters, waiting for the commendation ceremony to begin. She wore a simple dark blue dress and jacket, the kind of outfit that looked professional but not flashy. Her ribs were still wrapped tightly under her clothes. Detective Rodriguez had assured her it would be a small, private ceremony. Just a few police officials, Sarah, and maybe a couple of witnesses from the incident. No press, no cameras. But when Sarah was led into the conference room, she found it was bigger than she expected. There were about 40 people present. Police officers in uniform, city officials she did not recognize, and sitting in the front row, smiling warmly at her, was Mrs. Eleanor Chen. The elderly woman was dressed nicely in a light purple dress. Her arm was no longer bandaged, though Sarah could see fading bruises on her wrist. Next to Mrs. Chen sat a younger woman, who looked to be in her 40s, and 3 children of various ages. Her family, Sarah guessed. Jim from the Quick Stop was there too, looking uncomfortable in a suit and tie. He gave Sarah a small wave when their eyes met. Police Chief David Martinez stood at a podium at the front of the room. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and a crisp uniform. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chief Martinez began, "we are gathered here today to recognize an act of exceptional courage and skill. 4 days ago, a violent crime was stopped not by police officers, though we arrived as quickly as we could, but by an ordinary citizen who happened to have extraordinary training." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat as all eyes turned to her. "Miss Sarah Mitchell," the chief continued, "is a Navy veteran who served our country with distinction for 8 years. Though she has transitioned to civilian life, her training and her courage were called upon when 3 armed men attempted to rob the Quick Stop convenience store on Harbor Boulevard." The chief went on to describe the incident in detail. He talked about how Sarah had tried to de-escalate the situation first, how she had positioned herself to protect the other customers, how she had disabled 2 armed assailants using only her hands while injured, how her actions had ended a 3-week crime spree that had terrorized local businesses. The 3 suspects, Marcus Webb, James Patterson, and David Reeves, have all been charged with multiple felonies. They are currently in custody awaiting trial. Evidence collected from their residence links them to 7 armed robberies in our city. Miss Mitchell's intervention prevented what could have been their 8th and possibly most violent crime. Chief Martinez picked up a framed certificate from the podium. "Miss Mitchell, would you please come forward?" Sarah stood slowly, mindful of her ribs, and walked to the front of the room. The chief shook her hand warmly and presented her with the certificate. "On behalf of the San Diego Police Department and the citizens of this city, I present you with this certificate of commendation for your extraordinary bravery and service. You are a credit to your military training and an inspiration to us all." The room erupted in applause. Sarah accepted the certificate, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She had never been comfortable with public recognition. "Would you like to say a few words?" Chief Martinez asked quietly. Sarah had not prepared anything. She looked out at the faces staring at her expectantly. Then her eyes landed on Mrs. Chen, who was clapping enthusiastically, tears running down her face. "I appreciate this recognition," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "But I want to be clear about something. I did not do anything special. I saw people in danger and I had the ability to help, so I did. That is what any decent person would do. I am not a hero. I am just someone who was in the right place and had the right training." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "If there is anything I hope people take from this, it is that we all have a responsibility to look out for each other, to speak up when we see something wrong, to help when we can. You do not need military training to make a difference. You just need to care about other people." More applause followed. Sarah returned to her seat quickly, relieved that the speaking part was over. After the ceremony, people came up to congratulate her. Police officers shook her hand. City officials gave her their business cards. Everyone wanted to meet the woman who had stopped the robbery. Mrs. Chen was waiting patiently until the crowd thinned. Then she approached Sarah with her family in tow. "Miss Mitchell," Mrs. Chen said, her voice thick with emotion, "I want you to meet my daughter Lily and my grandchildren. David is 12, Sophie is 9, and little Emma is 6. The children looked at Sarah with wide, curious eyes. The 12-year-old boy seemed especially interested. "You are the lady who knows Kung Fu?" young David asked. Sarah smiled despite herself. Not exactly kung fu, but I did learn how to defend myself. Could you teach me? The boy asked eagerly. So I could protect my grandmother too? David, his mother said, embarrassed. Do not bother Miss Mitchell. It is okay, Sarah said. She knelt down carefully to the boy's eye level, wincing slightly at the pain in her ribs. The best way to protect people is not to learn how to fight. It is to learn how to avoid fights, to be aware of your surroundings, to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and most importantly, to get help from adults or police when there is danger. The boy nodded seriously, absorbing her words. Mrs. Chen placed her hand on Sarah's arm. I have been thinking, the elderly woman said, about what you said during the ceremony, about looking out for each other. I want to do something in my neighborhood to make it safer. There are a lot of elderly people where I live. Many of us are afraid to go out at night. I want to change that. That is a wonderful idea, Sarah said sincerely. Would you help me? Mrs. Chen asked. Not to teach us to fight, but to teach us awareness. How to be safe. I could organize a group. Maybe we could meet once or twice a month. Sarah hesitated. She had been planning to return to her quiet life as soon as this ceremony was over. But looking at Mrs. Chen's hopeful face, at the faces of her family, Sarah found herself nodding. Yes, she said. I would be happy to help with that. Mrs. Chen's face lit up with joy. She gave Sarah a tight hug, which made Sarah's ribs protest, but she did not pull away. Jim approached after the Chen family moved on to get refreshments. Miss Mitchell, he said awkwardly, I just wanted to say thank you again. I have been working at that store for 15 years. I have been through 2 robberies before. Both times I just did what they said and nobody got hurt. But this time, I do not know what would have happened if you had not been there. You did everything right, Jim, Sarah told him. You stayed calm. You tried to use the silent alarm. You did not try to be a hero. That was smart. I heard you were going to do some safety training with Mrs. Chen's group, Jim said. Would it be okay if I came to one of those sessions? I would like to learn more about how to handle situations like that. Of course, Sarah said. Everyone is welcome. As Sarah left the police headquarters an hour later, she felt different than when she had arrived. She had expected this ceremony to be the end of the story, a nice conclusion where she got recognized and then went back to normal life. But instead, it felt like a beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah found herself busier than she had been in years. Mrs. Chen was incredibly organized and motivated. She put up flyers in her neighborhood, contacted community centers, and spread the word through her church. Within 10 days, she had organized a community safety workshop at a local rec center. Sarah spent hours preparing for the workshop. She created handouts on situational awareness, basic safety tips, and emergency protocols. She coordinated with Detective Rodriguez to have a police officer present to discuss local crime trends and how to report suspicious activity. The night of the first workshop, Sarah expected maybe 20 people to show up. Instead, over 70 people filled the rec center's community room. Most were elderly, but there were also middle-aged adults, a few teenagers, and several young mothers with children. The courtroom was cold and formal. Sarah sat in the witness section, wearing a conservative gray suit. It had been 9 months since the incident at the Quick Stop. 9 months of healing, building, and growing. But today brought her back to where it all started. The trial for Marcus Webb, James Patterson, and David Reeves had finally arrived. Their lawyers had tried multiple delays, but the prosecution had pushed forward. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage from 7 different stores, DNA evidence, fingerprints, stolen property found in their shared apartment, and testimony from multiple victims. Sarah watched as the 3 men were led into the courtroom. They wore suits provided by their public defenders, but they could not hide what they were. Marcus Webb, the tall one who had kneed her in the ribs, kept his eyes down. James Patterson, the shorter, nervous one, fidgeted constantly. David Reeves, the lookout who had run away, stared straight ahead with no expression. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Lee, had prepared Sarah for this moment. They are going to try to make you look like you used excessive force, she had warned. Their defense will be that you attacked them, not the other way around. Just tell the truth. The video does not lie. The trial lasted 3 days. Sarah sat through testimony from Jim, the store clerk, from Eleanor Chen, who cried as she described being grabbed and threatened, from other victims of the crime spree who had been too scared to fight back. On the third day, Sarah was called to the witness stand. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat down and looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people who would decide the fate of 3 criminals. Miss Mitchell, Prosecutor Lee began, can you tell the court what happened on the evening of April 15th? Sarah took a breath and began her story. She described entering the store, noticing the 3 men, recognizing the signs of a robbery. She explained her military background in a way that was truthful but not boastful. She detailed her attempt to de-escalate the situation verbally. Why did you intervene? The prosecutor asked. Why not just let them take the money and leave? Because they had grabbed Mrs. Chen, Sarah said clearly, an elderly woman who could not defend herself. They were not just robbing the store anymore. They were threatening violence against an innocent person. I could not stand by and watch that happen. What happened next? Sarah described the confrontation. The knee strike to her ribs. Her response. The disarming of the knife. The control hold she used. She emphasized that she used only the minimum force necessary to stop the threats. Did you want to hurt these men? The prosecutor asked. No, Sarah said firmly. I wanted to stop them from hurting other people. That is all. The defense attorney, a man named Robert Graham, approached her for cross-examination. He was in his 60s with gray hair and an expensive suit. Miss Mitchell, you have extensive combat training, correct? I have defensive training, yes. You were a Navy SEAL, one of the most elite special forces units in the world. I was a Navy SEAL, yes. You are trained to kill people with your bare hands, are you not? I am trained to protect people and neutralize threats, Sarah corrected. There is a difference, but you could have killed my clients if you wanted to. I could have seriously injured them, yes. But I did not want to. I wanted to stop them and wait for police. Is it not true that you struck Mr. Patterson in the chest hard enough to knock the wind out of him? Yes, he was attacking me. I stopped his attack using controlled force. You twisted Mr. Webb's arm behind his back. Yes. He had just pulled a knife. I disarmed him and restrained him. You broke Mr. Webb's wrist. Sarah paused. She had not known that. I applied a standard control hold. If his wrist was broken, it was because he resisted. The hold itself should not break bones unless someone fights against it. The defense attorney showed her a medical report. According to this, Mr. Webb suffered a fractured wrist, 2 broken fingers, and severe bruising. I did not know about those injuries, Sarah said. I used the minimum force necessary to stop him from using a knife on me or others. Minimum force? The attorney said with false surprise. You are a trained killer who broke bones and hospitalized my clients. That sounds like excessive force to me. Objection, Prosecutor Lee said, standing, argumentative and mischaracterizing the witness's testimony. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Graham, ask questions, do not make speeches. The defense attorney tried several more times to make Sarah look like an aggressor, but each time she calmly explained her actions. She never got angry, never became defensive. She simply told the truth. Finally, the judge excused her from the stand. Sarah returned to her seat, her heart still racing from the pressure of being questioned. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found all 3 men guilty on all charges: armed robbery, assault, attempted kidnapping, multiple counts for multiple stores. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Marcus Webb received 12 years. James Patterson got 10 years. David Reeves, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received 8 years. After the sentencing, Eleanor Chen was waiting outside the courtroom. She hugged Sarah tightly. Justice, Eleanor said simply. Finally, justice. Those men cannot hurt anyone else now. How are you doing? Sarah asked the elderly woman. They had become close over the past 9 months. Eleanor had become like a grandmother to Sarah, always checking in, always supportive. I am doing well, Eleanor said with a smile. Much better than before. I'm not afraid anymore. Thanks to you and your workshops, I feel confident when I go out. So do many of my friends. They walked out of the courthouse together. The California sun was bright and warm. Sarah had parked several blocks away, so they walked slowly, enjoying the nice weather. Your foundation is doing such wonderful work, Eleanor said. I heard you hired 2 more instructors last month. 3, actually, Sarah said. We just brought on Maria Rodriguez. She is Jack Chen's sister, former Marine. She is great with the high school kids. And how many workshops have you done now? We will hit 100 next week. Over 3,000 people trained. It is incredible. They reached Eleanor's car first. The elderly woman turned to face Sarah. You know what I think about sometimes? Eleanor said. What if you had not been in that store that night? What if you had decided to skip the gym that day, or stopped at a different store or arrived 5 minutes later? My whole life might have ended that night. Or I might have been so traumatized I would never leave my house again. But instead, I met you. And my life got better, not worse. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. I think about that too. How one moment changed everything. Changed everything for the better, Eleanor emphasized. For me, for you, for everyone your foundation helps. Bad things happen in this world. But sometimes bad things lead to good things. That is what you taught me. After Eleanor drove away, Sarah walked to her own car. But instead of getting in, she stood there for a moment thinking about the journey of the past 9 months. The Community Shield Foundation had grown beyond her wildest expectations. They now had 7 instructors, all veterans. They had conducted workshops in 3 different counties. They had partnerships with 5 police departments, 12 community centers, and 8 schools. But more importantly, they had changed lives. Sarah read the feedback forms after every workshop. People wrote about feeling safer, more confident, more aware. Parents thanked her for teaching their children. Elderly people thanked her for giving them freedom again. Domestic violence survivors thanked her for helping them reclaim their power. Detective Rodriguez had become a good friend. He regularly consulted with the foundation on curriculum and helped coordinate with local police departments. He had also introduced Sarah to other law enforcement professionals who wanted to support her work. Her employer, Marcus Webb, had been true to his word. He allowed Sarah to split her time between security consulting and foundation work. The company even donated office space for the foundation and sponsored several workshops. Sarah's phone rang. It was Mike Torres, her old SEAL team leader. Sarah, I have someone I want you to meet, Mike said. Her name is Lieutenant Amy Patel. She just left the Navy after 6 years. She is struggling with the transition. I told her about your foundation and what you are doing. She wants to talk to you about maybe becoming an instructor. Send her my way, Sarah said. We are always looking for good people. She is dealing with some PTSD issues, Mike said more quietly. Combat-related. She is getting help, but she is having trouble finding purpose in civilian life. I think what you are doing could really help her. Sarah understood that struggle. She had felt lost too when she first left the Navy. The foundation had given her purpose again. Have her call me, Sarah said. We will talk. That evening, Sarah drove to a small cafe where she had agreed to meet Patricia Gomez from the women's shelter. They met monthly to discuss the foundation's programs and plan new initiatives. Patricia was already there, sipping tea and reviewing some papers. She smiled when Sarah sat down. I have amazing news, Patricia said. I just got approved for a grant that will allow us to expand our services. Part of that grant is specifically for safety education. I want to hire the Community Shield Foundation to do monthly workshops at the shelter. Paid work, not volunteer. Can you handle that?